Welcome back to A Smarter Way to Retire. I'm Tony Leonardi, and today, as I'm recording this, it's April 15th, tax day. And I'm taking a much needed break from preparing my taxes today to shake things up a bit and to explore the wild, wacky world of the federal income tax. Now, don't groan and hit pause. I'm not here to bore you with tax forms. We're diving into some jaw-dropping history, quirky facts, and yes, even a broken promise or two that'll make you laugh, maybe sigh, and definitely rethink your retirement game plan. Plus, we'll uncover just how much time and money you're spending to file those taxes every year. Spoiler, it's a lot. So grab your coffee, maybe a calculator for fun, and let's jump into the tax time machine to see how this all started and what it means for your future. Tax day always hits like a reality check, right? You're either doing a happy dance for a refund or you're staring at a bill wondering where it all went. But taxes aren't just a once-a-year headache. They're a massive piece of your retirement puzzle. The dollars you pay now and the ones you'll owe later shape the lifestyle you're dreaming of, whether that's beach sunsets or spoiling your grandkids. Today we're going on an historical adventure to uncover how the federal income tax began. We're going to dig up some head-scratching facts and reveal who's carrying the biggest load today. We'll also shine a light on the surprising effort it takes to file your taxes every year. By the end, I'll leave you with a few big questions to ponder as you plan your retirement. Let's kick things off with the origin story of the federal income tax. Let's set the scene. It's 1861. The Civil War is tearing the country apart, and the government's wallet is looking mighty thin to keep the Union fighting. Enter the Revenue Act of 1861, America's first federal income tax. It slapped a flat 3% tax on incomes over $800. Which in today's dollars would be like $24,000. But back then, only a handful of folks earned that much, so it barely made a dent. Here's the best part. They swore it was going to be temporary, just a wartime fix. Yeah, right. By 1862, only 1 year later, they got fancy, making the tax progressive. 3% for incomes from $600 to $10,000, and 5% for the big shots above that. But once the war ended, Congress said, okay, we're good, and they repealed the tax in 1872. So we had an income tax for about 11 years, and then for 20 glorious years following, Americans lived income tax-free. Can you even imagine checking your paycheck with no tax bite? That would be nice. Fast forward to the early 90s. The country is booming. Factories, railroads, you name it. But the government's hungry for cash to keep up. Tariffs, which we talked about last week, they were the old revenue standby. They weren't cutting it anymore. The government needed more money. In 1909, President Taft said, let's make income tax legit with a constitutional amendment. Thanks a lot, President Taft. By 1913, the 16th Amendment is ratified, giving Congress the green light to tax incomes from whatever source derived. And just like that, the modern income tax is born. Here's where it gets interesting. In 1913, this tax only touched about 1% of Americans. The top 1%. The starting rate was 1% on incomes over $3,000, which is roughly $99,000 today. The top rate, well, was a modest 7% for incomes over $500,000, or in today's dollars, about $16 million or more, 7%. The Form 1040 was a breezy 4 pages, including instructions. Compare that to today's tax code novel. But here's the real hook. Lawmakers pitched it to the public with a golden promise. Rates will stay low, and it will only hit the super wealthy. Sounds like a sweet deal, doesn't it? Well, buckle up, because in typical Washington fashion, that promise didn't last very long. That low rates forever vow, it crumbled faster than a bad New Year's resolution. World War I rolls in by 1917, just 4 years later, and the government's desperate for money. That top tax rate skyrockets from 7%, get this, to a mind-blowing 77% in just 1 year, 1918. If you were raking in millions back then, Uncle Sam was pocketing more than 3/4 of it. Post-war, rates dipped a bit, but the income tax was now a permanent guest. Then the Great Depression and World War II turned things up to an 11. By 1944, the top tax rate hit an unbelievable 94%. That is not a typo. On incomes over $200,000, 94%. Imagine earning a fortune and the government keeps 94 cents of every dollar above that line. That's enough to make you hide your wallet under the mattress, and many people did. Rates stayed brutal through the 1950s and into the early 60s, lingering at 91% for top earners. It wasn't until the Kennedy tax cuts in 1964, that's right, Democrat President Kennedy in 1964, softened things a bit, dropping to 77%, the top rate, then to 70% by the late 60s. The low tax stream of 1913 was ancient history, replaced by a tax code that grew thicker and trickier every year. Speaking of tricky, let's talk about what it takes to file your taxes today. According to recent data, the average American spends about 13 hours wrestling with their Form 1040 every year. That's nearly 2 full workdays spent digging through receipts, decoding IRS jargon, and praying that you didn't miss a deduction. For folks with business income, it's even worse. 24 hours on average is what they spend preparing their taxes. And it's not just time, you're shelling out cash as well. About $290 per person for tax software, accountants, or even just printer ink and coffee to stay awake. Add it all up, and Americans collectively burn through 7.1 billion hours and $464 billion just to comply with the tax code each year. That's enough to fund a tropical vacation for every retiree listening today. Think about that for your retirement planning. Could you use an extra 13 hours to plan that dream trip, or an extra $290 to boost your savings? This tax prep burden is a hidden cost we all pay, and it's a reminder to factor in not just what you owe, but the effort and the dollars to figure it out. Maybe it's time to ask your advisor about simplifying your finances to lighten that load. Let's hit pause for a second to tell a quirky story to keep things lively. Ever hear about how they caught Al Capone, the notorious gangster? Not for smuggling or for crime lording, but for tax evasion. In 1931, the IRS's undercover squad proved Capone was hiding his illegal cash from Uncle Sam. He got slapped with 11 years in prison, not for his mob empire, but for dodging taxes. It's proof the IRS doesn't mess around, whether you're a gangster or a retiree double-checking your 1099s. Moral of the story, keep those records straight, folks. It's less drama than having to go to Alcatraz. So where do things stand now? The tax system's still progressive. Higher earners pay a bigger slice. In 2022, the top 1% of folks with incomes over about $663,000 paid 40.4% of all the federal income taxes, while earning 22% of the total income. The top 5% of earners covered 59% of all the taxes, while earning 35% of the income. Meanwhile, the bottom 50%, those earning under $44,000, paid just 3% of taxes, thanks to credits like the Earned Income Tax Credit and the Child Tax Credit. In fact, many lower income households get money back from the IRS because of refundable credits. Here's a stat to chew on. The top marginal rate today is 37% for incomes over $609,350 if you're single in 2025. That's a long way from 94%, but it still packs a punch if you're there. And heads up, retirees, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires next year in 2026, which could bump the top rate up to 39.6% and all rates up unless Congress steps in. Your Social Security, pensions, or IRA withdrawals could push you into a higher tax bracket than you planned, so keep that in mind. One more fun fact to lighten the mood. Back in 1913, the Form 1040 was so simple you could knock it out over a quick lunch. 4 pages and done. Today it's a labyrinth of schedules and fine print. But here's a cool milestone. In 1986, the IRS rolled out electronic filing, and by 1992, you could e-file, even if you owed money. Compare that to 1965, when they launched the first toll-free helpline for tax questions. I bet the hold music was something else. It shows just how taxes have evolved and how the effort to file them keeps growing, eating into our time and into our wallets. All right, so let's bring this home. Why does this tax saga matter for your retirement? Taxes aren't just a today problem, they're a forever problem. That's 13 hours and $290 spent filing each year. That's time and money you could redirect to your nest egg or that bucket list adventure. And the history of taxes tells us rates and rules constantly shift, sometimes pretty fast. So here's what to think about. How will taxes hit your retirement income? Withdrawals from traditional IRAs or 401ks are taxed as regular, ordinary income. If rates climb, your savings could take a bigger hit. Are you braced for surprises? Required minimum distributions, or RMDs, kick in at age 73. And they often nudge you into a higher tax bracket, especially if you have a hefty, healthy retirement account. So what's your tax strategy? Tools like Roth conversions, timing of withdrawals, or charitable giving can save thousands off your tax bill, but they need to be planned carefully. Just like my mom budgeted early to take our whole family to Italy, you've got to plan early to shield your retirement from tax curveballs. Don't let a sneaky tax hike derail your dreams of hiking in the Rockies or teaching your grandkids to fish. Before we sign off, here are 3 big questions to mull over. Is the tax system fair? The top 1% pay 40% of taxes. Is that too much? Is it too little? Or is it just right? It's always a hot debate, and your take matters as tax policies shift. Why is it so complicated? We're spending 7.1 billion hours and $464 billion just to file our tax returns. Could a simpler system free up time and money for retirees like you to live better? Can you trust the rules? In 1913, they promised low rates forever, and poof, 4 years later, 77%. With 2026 tax changes looming, how much can you bank on today's tax laws for your 20-year plan? These aren't just tax day thoughts, they're retirement planning gold. Jot them down, chat with your advisor, or bounce them off a friend over coffee. They might spark your next big financial move. So that's our tax day roller coaster through the federal income tax's wild history. From a Civil War quick fix, 94% rates, Al Capone's tax bust, 13 hours of tax prep pain, and it's been a wild ride. Taxes hit your retirement harder than you might think. So let this history and those hefty filing costs inspire you to plan smarter. Next time, we'll be back with our 10-step retirement planning process, wrapping things up with making adjustments and improvements to your plan. Thanks for joining me on A Smarter Way to Retire. If this episode got your wheels turning, hit subscribe, drop a review for me, or share it with someone knee-deep in tax forms today. Got a crazy tax story or a retirement question? Send it my way. I'd love to hear it. Until next week, keep planning smart and happy tax day.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Osaic Wealth, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Osaic Wealth is separately owned, and other entities and/or marketing names, products, or services referenced here are independent of Osaic Wealth. The opinions expressed herein are for general information only and is not necessarily the opinions of Osaic Wealth or its representatives. Investing is subject to risk, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. It is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Please consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation.